Is the Mindful Man reading from Ghost School another chapter, which is on Amazon KDP. James stood with his hands on his hips looking triumphant. I knew we'd find it, he said. Oh great, they said, hiding their amazement. By the time they got back to their rooms they were exhausted and slept soundly. The next day was a music lesson and the teacher gave them all the instrument to play. James bashed away on the drums and the girls practiced chords on the guitar with their soft fingers. It was painful on the fingers and painful to the teacher. They studied the lives of the great composers, Mozart and Beethoven, and listened intently. The teacher was a very old lady. She was small and fragile looking, but she was very enthusiastic. It was obvious that she loved music, as all music teachers should. She played some Chopin on the piano, and it was very beautiful. The girls were spellbound as the piece was romantic, and they both tried not to look at James, who was affecting indifference. Although he could play the guitar, he kept it to himself. He didn't want to be the center of attention, singing love songs in front of the girls. The teacher's name was Mary. She was Scottish, and it was rumored that in her past life she had been an alcoholic driven to drink and despair by a tragic love affair. Now she was teetotal and a lot happier. She finished off the lesson by furiously playing the violin. Her head was shaking and her hair was flying everywhere. It was so funny. Even though the girls found her playing impressive, it was hard not to laugh, and they hid their giggles behind their hands. It was a relief when the break came. They all sat together and chatted. Anna asked James why he didn't play the guitar when he had the chance. Oh, I didn't want to show off, he said. The girls laughed and chatted about pop music while James fell into a daydream. That night he lay on his bed and thought back to his life on Earth and how things had changed. He was close to his mum, and the one consolation for him was that he had the girls for company, and at least he didn't have to fear death. He felt quite lonely and wished he had a girlfriend. He liked both the girls equally, and he hadn't decided which one he preferred or if he was willing to try. The next day they sat together for breakfast and coffee. Lucy and Anna chatted away, and James was silent as he was very tired. He found it hard to suppress a yawn. Anna asked him if he was okay. Sure, he said, I had a bad night's sleep. Oh, did said Lucy, and gave him a hug. He cheered up and tried not to blush. They had a lot of revision to do, so they spent the rest of the day in the library. A great place to relax in, he thought. Apart from the terrifying ghost, they had English literature study, so they buried their noses in their books. James was restless and had to wander around. He found it hard to concentrate on one thing at a time. He looked through the poetry books with interest. He had always liked poetry and wished he was a great poet, like the World War I poets, but obviously he had no desire to die in battle. When he was reading the poem, he almost found himself in the trenches, in the mud, feeling the terror of the bombs and the machine guns. He had a vivid imagination and found it easy to get lost in it. It was just as he was coming out of his reverie that he felt someone stood behind him. He looked round, and to his shock it was the ghostly librarian. He didn't scream or shout, as he was too frightened to make a noise. She looked very pale, and she had an anguished look in her eyes. She bent over him and grabbed the book and flung it violently at the wall. She smiled a thin, angry smile. He leapt up from the chair to get away. She walked towards the bookshelves and then disappeared. The library was empty, so there were no witnesses, and he ran to the girls to tell them what had happened. Hope you enjoyed it. Please sub me.